there's a strength most people will never understand because it doesn't yell, it doesn't chase, and it doesn't demand the spotlight. It's the strength of stillness, the strength of a woman who doesn't need to raise her voice to be heard because her presence alone speaks volumes. We live in a world that celebrates noise, a world where fast answers, loud opinions, and high-speed decisions are mistaken for wisdom, where being visible is often confused with being valuable. But let me ask you this. What if your power isn't in how loudly you speak, but in how deeply you listen? What if your greatest asset isn't how fast you move, but how still you can remain when the world is spinning? You see, true intelligence, especially in women, is often mistaken for silence, but it's not silence from fear. It's silence from clarity. There's a difference between being quiet because you're afraid and being quiet because you've already made peace within. A highly intelligent woman doesn't need to dominate the room to influence it. She doesn't need to win every debate to know her worth. She doesn't confuse attention with respect. Why? Because she's done the inner work. She's learned often through pain that the loudest person isn't always the wisest, and that the strongest woman is often the one who doesn't flinch when provoked, but pauses, reflects, and chooses with intention. Stillness is not the absence of action. It's the presence of mastery. Most people are trapped in mental chaos. They might look calm on the outside, but on the inside it's a constant battlefield. Their thoughts are begging for approval. Their hearts are chasing validation. Their minds are filled with imaginary conversations trying to prove a point no one even asked for. But a highly intelligent woman, she's done bargaining for peace outside. She's built it inside. Her mind is no longer a public market, open to every thought, every mood, every storm that comes her way. She's curated her inner world with discernment. Not everyone gets access. Not every emotion gets a reaction. Not every comment gets a reply. And this doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from alignment. You know, neuroscience has a term for the overwhelm we constantly live with, cognitive load. It refers to how much your brain is handling at any given moment. When you're exposed to nonstop emotional conflict, overthinking, and drama, your brain triggers cortisol, the stress hormone. And over time, that stress wears down your ability to think clearly, choose wisely, and love deeply. It physically damages the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making and emotional control. So when a woman chooses stillness, when she builds silence into her life, it's not weakness. It's self-defense. It's self-respect. It's self-mastery. Now let me paint two pictures. The first, a woman who's always reacting. Her partner makes a careless comment, she snaps. Her friend doesn't text back, she spirals. Her coworker forgets to credit her, she's seething. Her emotional world is on fire. She's a passenger in her own nervous system. Unpredictable, unanchored, exhausted. Now, the second, her partner raises his voice. She doesn't match it. She breathes. She grounds herself. And in that moment, she doesn't just hear the words, she sees the pain underneath them. She chooses compassion over reaction. She chooses wisdom over ego. That's the woman who wins in the long run. Not because she dominates, but because she knows how to direct her energy. You don't get peace from reacting. You get it from choosing not to engage in every battle that invites you. There's a phrase from Eastern philosophy, the wise one drinks water, but hears the ripple. Stillness doesn't mean you're disconnected. It means you're deeply, deeply connected to what most people miss. You feel what others don't say. You sense when someone's smile doesn't reach their eyes. You notice the energy in a room before a word is spoken. That's intuition. That's presence. That's power. But let me be clear. Stillness isn't just spiritual. It's incredibly practical, especially in relationships. In a world addicted to reaction, a woman who responds with pause becomes magnetic. She doesn't fight every battle. She doesn't explain herself to everyone. She doesn't dance for approval. And ironically, that's what draws the right people to her. Stillness is not withdrawal. It's discernment. It's choosing where your energy goes. instead of handing it out like free samples at a grocery store. One of the most sacred things a woman can do is guard her attention, because your attention is your life. Where it goes, your life flows. So here's the truth. You don't owe anyone access to your nervous system. Not every insult deserves your emotion. Not every misunderstanding needs your explanation. Not every invitation into chaos requires your attendance. If there's one thing I've learned through my own journey from monk to mindset coach, it's this. Peace isn't something you find. Peace is something you practice. It's a skill. It's a decision you make again and again. And stillness, that's your training ground. It teaches you to hold space, to breathe instead of blame, to reflect instead of react, to choose clarity over chaos. That's where emotional intelligence lives. Not in how much you know, but in how well you navigate what you feel. So if you've ever been called too quiet, too slow to react, too calm in the storm, let me tell you something. You're not too anything. You're just ahead of your time. You've built something inside that can't be shaken, and the world is starting to feel it. Before we move to the next section, I want to leave you with this question. When was the last time you paused, not because you were forced to, but because you chose to protect your peace? If that question struck a chord, comment below and let me know. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Like and subscribe so we can continue growing together. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Let's keep going. Most people think being strong means being hard, unbending, unfeeling, untouchable. And they think being soft means being weak, passive, fragile, easily broken. But what if I told you the truth is the opposite? That real strength isn't about how loud you can shout, but how deeply you can feel without falling apart. That real softness isn't about being walked over, but being so anchored in your truth that you can open your heart without fear. You see, the most powerful woman isn't just strong. She's soft and strong at the same time. She knows when to speak and when to stay silent, when to lean in and when to walk away, when to be steel and when to be water. And that right there is a form of intelligence the world rarely talks about. Let's be honest. Most of us had to learn strength the hard way. You were soft once and someone took advantage of you. You forgave too quickly and they hurt you again. You kept showing up and they kept disappearing. So what did you do? You built walls. You toughened up. You told yourself, never again. But here's the trap. In trying to protect your heart, you locked yourself out of it too. You pushed away the very things that make love feel safe, vulnerability, empathy, compassion, because somewhere along the way, you confused guarding yourself with healing yourself. And I get it. I used to think that being unbothered meant I was winning, that not caring was strength, that cutting people off was maturity. But maturity isn't hardening. It's knowing. It's knowing how much of your softness to give and to whom. It's knowing when your silence is self-respect and when it's self-sabotage. It's knowing the difference between peace and avoidance. Let me tell you something powerful. A highly intelligent woman doesn't flinch in the face of disrespect. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't chase explanations. She simply removes access. She doesn't slam doors. She closes them quietly. Because her silence is not absence, it's discernment. This woman has learned that energy is sacred, that her peace is non-negotiable, that her presence is a gift, not a guarantee. When a man crosses her boundary, she doesn't explode. She doesn't plead. She doesn't try to teach him how to love her. She simply steps back and lets his actions reveal his level. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. That's strength. But now let's talk about her softness. She still forgives. She still feels. She still loves deeply. But the difference, she doesn't abandon herself to do it. Softness is power with wisdom. It's feeling your emotions without drowning in them. It's expressing your needs without blaming others for not meeting them. It's being vulnerable, but with discernment, not desperation. And this kind of emotional discipline, it's not easy. It's trained. You don't just wake up one day emotionally balanced. You build that muscle day by day, choice by choice. Like when you're angry, And instead of unleashing that anger, you pause, you breathe, you ask yourself, is this reaction aligned with the woman I'm becoming? That's discipline. Or when someone disappoints you, and instead of begging them to do better, you acknowledge your hurt, but you let go of the illusion that they'll change. That's wisdom. Or when life overwhelms you, and instead of collapsing, you slow down. You adjust your rhythm. You listen to your body. That's intelligence. Psychologists call this emotional flexibility, the ability to feel everything, but not be ruled by anything. It's not about suppressing emotions. It's about choosing how and when you express them. It's what makes you magnetic in relationships. Because men, real men, aren't drawn to drama. They're drawn to depth. They don't want a woman who's emotionless. They want a woman who's emotionally safe, who can say, this hurt me without attacking, who can set a boundary without threatening, who can be soft without falling apart. This woman becomes a sanctuary, not because she's perfect, but because she's present, because she knows herself. And that knowing, that inner clarity, it shifts everything. There's a story I once heard of a woman whose partner had grown distant. She tried everything, talking, crying, staying quiet, even pretending nothing was wrong. Nothing worked. Until one day, she looked him in the eyes and said, I love you, but I will no longer carry the weight of this relationship alone. I am here if you want to rebuild, but I will not beg for your presence. No yelling, no blaming, no threats, just truth. And that was the moment he truly heard her, not because she was louder, but because she was clearer. You see, clarity carries a frequency. It cuts through noise. It commands respect. And when you speak from that place, not from pain, not from panic, but from power, people feel it. That's what happens when a woman learns to hold both softness and strength. So if you've ever been told, you're too emotional, you're too cold, you care too much, you don't care enough, let me tell you something. It's not that you're too much or too little. It's that you haven't been in environments that honor both your depth and your discipline. But now you're building that within, because a woman who learns to be both soft and still, who doesn't rush to react or shrink to please, who can feel deeply yet stay centered, that woman, she becomes unshakable, not because she controls others, but because she controls herself. Her energy becomes protective, yet nurturing, firm, yet graceful, steel, wrapped in velvet. That's the balance. That's the brilliance. That's the woman who rewrites what power looks like. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the energy shift before anyone said a word? Have you ever looked at someone and sensed the truth beneath their smile? That is observation. Not the kind where you just see things, but the kind where you understand them, where you feel them. And that kind of awareness, it's a superpower, but it's so quiet, most people never notice it. In a world obsessed with reaction, with shouting louder, proving more, moving faster, a highly intelligent woman chooses something different. She observes. She doesn't rush to speak. She doesn't jump to conclusions. She doesn't force her presence into the spotlight. She listens. She watches. She feels what's beneath the words. Not because she's afraid to speak, but because she knows when she finally does, her words will matter. There's a reason monks spend so much time in silence. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they're training the mind to notice what everyone else ignores. When I lived in the ashram, one of the greatest lessons I learned was this. The more you observe, the more life reveals itself to you. And a woman who trains herself to observe without judgment, without fear, she doesn't just survive relationships. She becomes fluent in them. She sees the contradiction in someone's eyes before their actions prove it. She hears the hesitation in their voice when they say they're fine. She senses the shift in energy when a conversation turns dishonest. And because she's watching with presence, she's not just seeing what's said, she's reading what's unspoken. That's not paranoia. That's wisdom. You know what else is true? Most people don't listen to understand. They listen to reply. They're just waiting for their turn to speak, but not her. She's not waiting to be the loudest in the room. She's observing the room itself. She notices who claims credit and who gives it. She sees who changes their tone when authority walks in. She tracks the small inconsistencies, like who smiles at you in public but mocks you in private. And it's not that she's looking for flaws. She's just not blinded by performance. While others are busy performing, she's perceiving. That perception. It protects her. It positions her. It guides her. And when she does speak, people listen not out of habit, but out of respect. There's a story I love about a woman who started a new job. She didn't walk in trying to dominate. She didn't introduce herself with grand gestures. She didn't overshare or overimpress. Instead, for the first few weeks, she simply observed. She watched how people treated the janitor versus the CEO. She listened to how they spoke behind closed doors. She noticed who asked thoughtful questions and who only spoke to be seen. By the time she finally offered her opinion, her insight landed with power. Why? Because her words were rooted in truth, not ego, in presence, not performance. This is the kind of woman who makes everyone pause, not because she demands attention, but because her awareness commands it. Observation is more than a personality trait. It's a skill. A highly intelligent woman hones it every day. She watches how people respond when they're told no. She notices how someone treats the waitress. She pays attention to what people do when no one is watching. She knows that character doesn't show up when things are easy. It shows up when things are inconvenient. That's when the mask slips. And she's learned not to ignore those moments. Not because she's looking to judge, but because she values her peace. She knows what it costs to trust the wrong person. She's been there, and she's not going back. Neuroscience backs this up. There's a system in your brain called the mirror neuron network. It helps you empathize, intuit, and emotionally decode what others are feeling, even when they don't say it. When you observe with full presence, you're literally strengthening the part of your brain that helps you understand people deeply and accurately. It's not magic. It's biology. And she's mastered it. She can feel the shift in the room. She notices when someone talks about their dream and their eyes light up. She notices when someone mentions their past and their voice breaks slightly. And because she notices, she can respond with intention. She can meet people where they are not where they pretend to be. But here's the real magic. She doesn't just observe others. She observes herself. She watches her own tone when she's tired. She tracks the patterns in her thoughts when she feels insecure. She notices how she shrinks when she's trying to be liked, and how she tenses when she's about to betray her own boundary. She doesn't judge these things. She learns from them. And that learning, that's what makes her unshakable. Because when you can observe yourself without shame, without blame, you can grow, you can evolve past old identities, you can break toxic patterns, you can stop being a prisoner of your own reactions. That's what observation gives you. Freedom, clarity, power. One of the wisest women I know once told me, I don't ask too many questions. I just let people show me the answers. And it stuck with me. Because when you observe, you don't need to demand proof. People show you who they are in 100 subtle ways, through how they handle rejection, through how they treat people they don't need, through how they act when no one's watching. Observation becomes your filter. It's how you protect your peace before it gets violated. It's how you choose who gets access before they earn it. And in relationships, this makes all the difference. So here's what I'll leave you with. If you feel like you're always one step ahead, like you feel things others don't, that's not a burden. That's your brilliance. You're not too sensitive. You're tuned in. Your ability to observe is your armor. Your awareness is your gift. Your calm is your edge. Keep noticing. Keep feeling. Keep choosing your energy with precision. Because in a world that's lost in reaction, the woman who observes, she becomes the one who leads. There are two kinds of people in this world: those who wait for inspiration and those who create it. Those who scroll, binge, and react, and those who build, craft, and shape. Most people, they consume constantly, passively, unconsciously. They consume opinions, validation, trends, drama, distractions, all while forgetting that every time they consume without intention, they lose connection to their inner compass. But a highly intelligent woman, she flips the script. She stops looking to the world to hand her identity and starts creating it, not through big performances, not through applause, but through daily sacred intentional choices. She doesn't wait for the world to give her permission. She creates space. She creates rhythm. She creates her reality. Let's be honest, consumption is addictive. It gives the illusion of progress without the pain of action. But the woman who chooses creation over consumption understands something most people miss. That inspiration doesn't strike the passive. It visits the prepared. You don't become more confident by watching motivational videos. You become confident by doing hard things consistently. You don't build identity by collecting quotes. You build it by living them. She doesn't chase a Pinterest perfect life. She builds a grounded one day by day, brick by brick, ritual by ritual. And in doing so, she reclaims herself. Creation, in her world, isn't about art or aesthetics. It's about agency. She creates time for rest. She creates space for stillness. She creates order in her home, flow in her calendar, peace in her conversations. Even if she's heartbroken, even if life is heavy, even if no one is watching, especially then, because creation is how she returns to herself. There's a woman I met years ago going through a breakup that shattered her identity. She had poured everything into that relationship. When it ended, she didn't know who she was without it. She tried therapy. She read every book. She followed every self-help account on Instagram. And still, she felt hollow. Until one day, she picked up a paintbrush she hadn't touched in 10 years. She sat by the window and began to paint, not for the world, not for social media, just for herself. And in that moment, she remembered something profound. I still have something to give this world beyond my pain. That's creation. Not for performance, for presence. Science calls this the default mode network, the part of your brain that activates during intentional reflection, creativity, and emotional healing. When you create, you don't escape your reality. You reintegrate it. You stitch meaning back into your experiences. You come home to yourself. And when she creates, her nervous system softens. Her breathing deepens. Her thoughts slow down. Her clarity returns. She becomes grounded not because life got easier, but because she became anchored again. Here's what's wild. The more a woman creates, the less she depends on the outside world to validate her. She no longer needs her partner's praise to feel worthy. She no longer relies on a boss's recognition to feel capable. She no longer waits for a friend's text to feel seen because her life is full from within. She's no longer operating from depletion. She's pouring from overflow. Her mornings are no longer dictated by anxiety. They begin with intention, maybe a walk, a journal, a stretch, a prayer. Not because someone told her to do it, because she knows she's worth starting the day in alignment. She doesn't just exist through her days, she shapes them. And that shift, it transforms everything. Think about this. A woman who is always reacting to life will always feel behind. But a woman who is creating her rhythm becomes the author of her day. She decides when to pause. She decides what gets her attention. She decides who gets access. Even her love becomes different. She doesn't need someone to complete her. She invites someone into a life she's already filled with intention. She becomes the kind of partner who gives because she wants to, not because she's trying to earn anything. Her relationships shift from desperation to generosity, from fear to freedom. And let's talk about how this impacts time. You ever notice how fast time moves when you're just scrolling, jumping from task to task, caught in a cycle of distraction? Now think of the last time you created something, even something small. Maybe you made a meal from scratch. Maybe you rearranged your room. Maybe you wrote something honest in a notebook. Time didn't speed up. It slowed down. You were present. You were in it. You weren't racing through life. You were rooted in it. That's the difference between motion and momentum. Motion is frantic. Momentum is intentional. She no longer lets time happen to her. She shapes it. And yes, it takes discipline. It's easier to scroll than to write. Easier to binge than to breathe. Easier to consume than to create. But she doesn't wait for motivation to strike. She doesn't wait until she feels like it. She builds a habit, maybe 10 minutes a day, maybe a tech-free hour on Sundays, maybe just one space in her home that feels like hers. Whatever it is, she commits. Because she's not just building a life, she's building the woman she promised herself she'd become. And creation is the path to that woman. So what does this look like practically? She journals not to vent, but to clarify her thoughts. She meditates not to be perfect, but to remember her breath. She creates order in her home, not for aesthetics, but because her nervous system deserves peace. She makes small, beautiful things, not for applause, but for herself. She doesn't perform. She returns again and again to her center, and in doing so, she becomes magnetic. Because nothing is more attractive than a woman who is full, not from noise, but from nourishment. A woman who creates doesn't just ask, who am I supposed to be? She asks, what do I want to build today? And then she gets to work. That's creation. That's clarity. That's power. Here's a truth we rarely say out loud. People don't always leave when you're hurting. Sometimes they stay and drain you. They stay and push your limits. They stay and test your silence, your softness, your patience. And that's why a highly intelligent woman doesn't just learn to say no, she learns to stop explaining it. Because her boundaries are no longer a performance. They're not announcements, they're not debates, they're not apologies wrapped in politeness. They're energy. And her energy, it speaks long before her words do. See, for too long, she thought being kind meant being endlessly available. She believed love meant sacrifice. She thought patience meant silence. And forgiveness meant giving people unlimited chances. But then she learned the difference between being kind and being self-abandoning. That's when everything shifted. She stopped treating her presence like a discount. She stopped offering explanations for her standards. And she started choosing herself not with arrogance, but with alignment. Because here's what she realized. Explaining a boundary to someone who benefits from you not having one is a waste of breath. She used to stay in relationships where she was constantly defending her worth. She'd say, please respect my time. Please hear my needs. Please meet me halfway. And every time they'd promise change. And every time nothing changed. So now she doesn't fight for her worth anymore. She walks in it. When someone talks over her, she doesn't raise her voice. She stops talking. When someone dismisses her needs, she doesn't over-explain. She makes space between them. When someone violates her peace, she doesn't beg for understanding. She withdraws her access. Because her absence speaks louder than her protest ever could. Boundaries are not brick walls. They're rhythms. And a woman who has been through heartbreak, manipulation, confusion, she learns to move in rhythm with her truth. Some people match that rhythm, some don't. And the ones who don't, she doesn't chase. She doesn't plead. She lets them go because if peace has a price, she's not paying it. Let's go deeper. In psychology, there's a term called enmeshment. It's when your identity becomes so entangled with someone else's emotions that you lose your sense of self. Highly intelligent women have often lived this. They've stayed too long in spaces that drained them. They've explained their trauma to people who weaponized it. They've lowered their volume just to make someone else feel more powerful, but no more. Now, she knows If someone truly values her, they won't need her to shrink for connection. Love doesn't demand your silence. Respect doesn't require your exhaustion. I once coached a woman who told me, Jay, I say yes to everything because I don't want to seem difficult. But when we look closer, her life was filled with quiet resentment. She was exhausted, not just physically, but spiritually. She felt invisible in relationships, used at work, taken for granted at home. And the moment she began setting small, firm boundaries, everything shifted. Yes, some people left, but the ones who stayed, they grew, they listened, they adapted, because boundaries don't just protect you, they elevate the people around you. But let's be clear, this doesn't mean she becomes cold. It means she becomes clear. She's not aggressive. She's anchored. When someone calls her after 10 p.m. and she's resting, she doesn't justify ignoring the phone. She just does it. When someone invites her to an event that doesn't align, she doesn't say, sorry, I can't. She says, that doesn't work for me. No shame, no guilt, just self-respect. Because the woman she's becoming no longer trades her well-being for other people's comfort. Boundary don't make her difficult. They make her disciplined. And the people who truly see her, they don't need long explanations to honor her space. They respect her rhythm. They feel her energy. They value her presence because it's not always available. And that's the difference. See, when your energy is scattered, people treat it like it's disposable. But when your energy is sacred, people show up differently, or they don't show up at all. And either way, you're at peace. Let's flip it inward for a moment, because boundaries aren't just about others. They're about you. She sets boundaries with her thoughts. She tells herself, not today, when her mind tries to spiral into old stories. She sets boundaries with her emotions. She doesn't let anger write texts. She doesn't let sadness pick partners. She doesn't let loneliness reopen doors that peace had already closed. She sets boundaries with her habits. She stops checking her phone first thing. She stops people-pleasing when her soul says no. She stops revisiting wounds that have already started healing. Because now, she guards her energy like it's currency and only invests where there's a return. There's a quote I share often, your boundary isn't up for debate. If someone doesn't like it, they're free to walk away. And this woman, she embodies that truth. She doesn't try to convince people to treat her well. She shows them how she treats herself. And that becomes the standard. People learn, if you want to stay in her life, you have to rise to meet her because she's not lowering herself anymore. And yes, some will call her distant, cold, proud. But what they're really saying is, she's no longer easy to manipulate. She no longer gives just to feel worthy. She no longer explains herself to people who never listened anyway. And to that, she smiles because her peace is louder than their noise. Her clarity is stronger than their confusion. Her dignity is rooted in discipline, not approval. So here's the reminder. You don't need to shout your boundaries to make them real. You don't need to justify them to make them valid. You just need to live them consistently, unapologetically, powerfully. And in doing so, you teach the world, my energy is sacred. My presence is earned. And I don't need your understanding to honor my truth. That is the power of embodied boundaries. There's a kind of quiet strength that can't be faked. You don't learn it from a book. You don't find it in someone else. You build it through repetition, through rhythm, through ritual. It's the kind of strength that shows up in the way she breathes before she speaks, in how she pours her tea with presence, in how she chooses to begin and end each day with intention, not obligation. Because the woman who respects herself doesn't just talk about peace. She protects it. And her protection doesn't begin with boundaries toward others. It begins with the way she treats herself. Let me ask you a question. What's the first thing you do when you wake up? Do you reach for your phone and let the world hijack your thoughts? Do you check notifications and instantly compare your life to someone else's highlight reel? Or do you pause, breathe, and begin with you? Because that single choice determines the tone of your entire day. Highly intelligent women know this. They don't just hope for peace, they design it. They don't wait for their partner to calm them. They don't wait for their job to fulfill them. They don't wait for life to give them a break. They create tiny moments, daily rituals that anchor them in stability. In a world addicted to urgency, she chooses rhythm, and that rhythm, it becomes her root system. Rituals are not routines. They're not about productivity. They're about presence. One woman told me, Jay, I started lighting a candle every evening, not for any big reason, just as a way to come home to myself. And over time, that tiny flame became a symbol, a signal to her nervous system. You're safe now. You're home. You made it through another day. On good days, she lit that candle with joy. On bad days, she lit it with tears. But no matter what she showed up, that's what ritual is. It's a return to self, a return to peace, a return to dignity. And here's what science says. When you create daily rituals like journaling, stretching, silent walking, or mindful cooking, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system. You calm your body. You reduce cortisol. You improve cognitive clarity and emotional regulation. In short, you train your mind to stop spiraling. You teach your body what safety feels like. And in relationships, that changes everything. Because now, she doesn't need drama to feel alive. She doesn't create chaos to feel connection. She doesn't rely on her partner to regulate her emotions because she's already practiced that internally. Her rituals become her stability, and that stability becomes her strength. Let's talk about how this affects her love life. She used to attract relationships that matched her inner chaos. People who were inconsistent, emotionally volatile, confusing, and for a while, she mistook that unpredictability for passion. But now, she doesn't chase highs. She sustains wholeness. She walks into a relationship already full, already nourished, already at peace. Her partner doesn't complete her, he complements her, because she has built a life that feeds her soul, not one that depends on someone else to keep her stable. I've seen women shift their entire identity through one small ritual, waking up 30 minutes earlier to journal, walking without headphones to hear their own thoughts, breathing deeply before replying to a triggering message, sitting in silence instead of scrolling for stimulation. It's not about grand gestures. It's about consistent choices, because consistency isn't just a productivity hack. It's an act of self-respect. You're telling your future self, I've got you. I won't abandon you again. And let me be honest, creating rituals isn't always glamorous. You won't always feel inspired. You won't always feel motivated. That's why she doesn't wait for emotion to lead her. She lets commitment lead, whether she's heartbroken or hopeful, tired or energized. She still returns to the ritual because the ritual is not about how she feels. It's about who she's becoming. And every time she shows up, she reinforces that identity. She no longer says, I'll meditate when I'm less busy. I'll journal when I'm in the mood. I'll rest when everything is done. No, she says, this comes first because I come first. Not out of ego, but out of alignment. Because if she doesn't make herself a priority, she knows the world won't do it for her. There's a woman I met who told me she used to run on empty giving, serving, helping, until one day she broke down in the middle of a grocery store aisle. Not because of something dramatic, but because she realized she hadn't had a moment to herself in weeks. So she made a decision. Every morning before anyone else woke up, she'd take 10 minutes just for her. Sometimes she wrote, sometimes she just stared out the window with tea in her hand. And within 3 weeks, everything changed. Her reactions softened, her clarity sharpened, her self-trust returned, all because of a simple ritual. Rituals don't fix your life. They remind you that you still have agency over it. They don't make the chaos go away. They teach you how to stay centered in spite of it. And when she's centered, she stops seeking external validation. She doesn't need a compliment to feel beautiful. She cared for her body with love this morning. She doesn't need applause to feel accomplished. She followed through on her own promise today, even if no one saw. She doesn't need to beg for connection. She's already connected to herself. Let me leave you with this. The way you pour your tea, the way you breathe between meetings, the way you speak to yourself when no one's around, that is who you are becoming. And the woman who tends to those details, she becomes unshakable. Not because life stopped testing her, but because she built rituals strong enough to carry her through it. So if you've been feeling lost, scattered, or stuck, don't wait for a miracle. Start with a ritual and let that ritual become your rhythm. Let that rhythm become your refuge. Let that refuge become your identity. Because the woman who returns to herself every day, she never loses her way for long. There comes a moment in every woman's life when she gets tired. Not physically, not emotionally, but spiritually tired of convincing, tired of performing, tired of proving her worth to people who never deserved access in the first place. And when that moment arrives, something sacred shifts. She no longer speaks to be understood. She no longer performs to be seen. She no longer explains herself because she embodies herself. Her worth doesn't come with a resume. It's not up for negotiation. It's not waiting for permission. It lives in how she breathes. It moves through how she walks. It radiates in the silence between her sentences. This woman, she doesn't argue about her boundaries. She doesn't campaign for her dignity. She doesn't beg anyone to love her, right? Because she finally understands something most people never will. Respect isn't requested, it's reflected. And when you respect yourself deeply, consistently, unapologetically, people adjust or they exit. And either way, she's good. There's a quote I often return to. Your presence is your answer. Your absence is your answer. Your peace is your answer. That's the energy she walks in now. If someone asks, why don't you let people talk to you like that anymore? She doesn't give a speech. She just smiles. If someone says, you've changed, she doesn't shrink. She simply says, I grew. If someone wants her to justify her healing, her growth, her distance, her standards, she no longer entertains the debate because growth doesn't require a panel of judges. It requires practice. And she's been practicing. The rituals she performs in private have redefined her identity in public. The way she chooses her tone, her silence, her truth. It's all intentional now. She used to wonder, why don't they treat me right? Now she asks, why did I allow it for so long? That shift, it changes everything. She no longer tolerates breadcrumbs when she's learned how to bake her own feast. She no longer sacrifices her rhythm to dance with people who don't know the beat. She no longer waits to be chosen because she already chose herself. And the world finally starts to respond differently. In romantic relationships, she becomes both grounding and mysterious. Grounding because her energy is clear. She's not playing games. She's not testing. She's not hinting. She knows what she wants. And more importantly, she knows what she'll never tolerate again. But mysterious? Because she can't be easily manipulated anymore. You can't guilt her. You can't gaslight her. You can't guilt trip her into breaking her own heart. She's not here to convince you she's worthy. She's here to live like she is. And that changes the dynamic. See, emotional manipulation thrives in confusion, but she's no longer confused. She's not harsh. She's just clear. She doesn't threaten to leave. She leaves. She doesn't ask you to change 10 times. She notices when you don't. She doesn't chase closure. She creates it. Because the woman she's becoming doesn't need chaos to feel connected. She doesn't need intensity to feel intimacy. She needs consistency. She needs respect. She needs peace. And if you can't offer that, she'll offer distance. Let's talk about embodiment. Embodiment means you don't just say, I'm healing. You show it in how you respond to disrespect. You don't just post about self-love, you demonstrate it in who you allow into your life. You don't just preach peace, you live it, even when it's hard. She's no longer addicted to potential. She's in love with reality. If someone's words don't align with their actions, she listens to the actions. If someone says they care but they're inconsistent, She no longer makes excuses for them because she's done editing herself to fit someone else's comfort zone. And the world, it will try to label her too much, too intense, too cold, too proud. But she's no longer shrinking to fit into those boxes because she knows now most people are uncomfortable around a woman who knows herself. She doesn't ask for attention. She doesn't crave applause. She doesn't need to be liked by everyone. She just needs to live in alignment. And that alignment, it becomes her light. Let me tell you something important. The most powerful woman in the room is rarely the loudest. She's the one who knows when to speak and when to stay silent. She's the one who doesn't chase validation because she's already validated herself. She's the one whose absence leaves an ache, not because she begged to be missed, but because her energy was irreplaceable. This woman, she's not looking to be saved. She saved herself. Every morning she rises in ritual. Every boundary she sets without explanation. Every time she chooses solitude over being tolerated, she reminds herself, I am the standard. So here's the truth. You don't need to explain your boundaries. You don't need to defend your healing. You don't need to convince someone to see your value. You just need to embody it. Because when you walk like you matter, when you speak like your words have weight, when you love yourself like no one else's love could replace your own, the world rises to meet you. And those who can't, they fall away quietly, naturally, like leaves in autumn. No drama, no chaos, no resistance, just space. Space for something better, something truer, something worthy of the woman you've become. So if you've been explaining yourself over and over, pause it and ask yourself, what would it look like to live so fully in alignment that my energy speaks before I do? Then do that over and over again until your life reflects it, until your relationships respect it, until your soul rests in it. Because the woman who embodies her worth, she doesn't need a microphone. She is the message. And the world listens, not because she demands it, but because her presence whispers what her words never need to say. I am whole. I am home. I am enough. Every single day. In silence. In strength. In softness. In stillness. She lives it. And that is power.